Midnight rain glazed the empty streets of Chicago as Daniel Mercer stepped off the last train. The station lights flickering like tired eyes that refused to stay open. He checked his phone and realized the battery had died during the ride. The silence in the station felt unusually heavy, as if something had been waiting for him to arrive. Daniel had lived in the city for 6 years and thought he knew every strange corner of it. Yet tonight the station looked unfamiliar, like a place copied from memory, but slightly wrong in every detail. Even the exit sign buzzed with a low electrical hum that made the air feel tense. He walked toward the stairway that led to the street, his footsteps echoing across the tiled platform. The echoes didn't fade the way they normally would. Instead, they seemed to repeat half a second later, as if another pair of footsteps followed behind him. Daniel paused halfway up the stairs and listened carefully. The station was empty, and the train had already disappeared into the tunnel darkness. Still, the faint sound of another step echoed again. He turned around slowly and looked back down the staircase. Nothing moved in the dim yellow lights below, but the feeling of being watched settled into his chest like cold metal. Outside, the rain had turned into a thin mist drifting between the buildings. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter and began walking toward his apartment 3 blocks away. The city felt strangely quiet for a Friday night. Most windows were dark, and even the usual late-night traffic was gone. The only sound came from water dripping off street signs and pooling along the curb. It was the kind of silence that made every movement feel louder than it should be. As Daniel crossed the first intersection, he noticed something odd about the traffic light ahead. It kept switching between red and green even though no cars were anywhere in sight. The rhythmic clicking echoed down the empty street. He walked past it quickly, telling himself the city's old wiring probably caused glitches like that all the time. Still, the steady clicking followed him longer than it should have. It faded only after he turned the corner. Halfway down the block, he passed a small convenience store that normally stayed open all night. Tonight, the metal shutters were closed, and the neon sign was off. A paper notice hung crookedly on the door. Daniel leaned closer to read it through the glass. The paper simply said closed until further notice in messy black marker. Something about the handwriting looked hurried, almost frightened. As he stepped away, the streetlight above him flickered twice. For a brief second, the sidewalk went completely dark. When the light returned, Daniel noticed another shadow on the pavement behind him. He spun around immediately. The street was empty again, stretching into quiet darkness on both ends. Yet the uneasy feeling in his stomach refused to disappear. Daniel told himself he was just tired from work and needed sleep. He started walking faster toward his apartment building. The rain grew slightly heavier, whispering against the pavement. His building stood on a narrow street squeezed between 2 older brick structures. Normally, the lobby lights glowed warmly through the glass doors. Tonight, the inside looked dim. Daniel pushed the door open and stepped into the lobby. The overhead lights flickered as if struggling to stay on. The old elevator sat at the end of the hall with its metal doors closed. He pressed the elevator button and waited. The indicator above the doors showed the car slowly descending from the 12th floor. A low mechanical rumble echoed through the walls. While he waited, Daniel noticed the security camera above the mailboxes. Its small red light blinked steadily. For some reason, the camera lens seemed pointed directly at him. The elevator doors slid open with a tired metallic sound. Daniel stepped inside and pressed the button for the 7th floor. The doors closed behind him with a heavy clank. The elevator began rising slowly through the building. The fluorescent light above him buzzed quietly. Daniel watched the floor numbers climb one by one. When the elevator passed the 5th floor, it suddenly stopped. The light flickered and dimmed. The number display changed to something Daniel had never seen before. Instead of 6, the screen showed a blinking symbol that looked like a distorted number 9. The elevator remained perfectly still. Then it began moving again. Daniel frowned and stared at the panel. According to the building directory, there was no 9th floor. The elevator should have gone directly from 8 to 10. The elevator stopped again with a sudden jerk. The doors slid open slowly. Outside was a dark hallway Daniel had never seen before. The carpet looked older than the rest of the building, and the lights were dim and yellow. No apartment numbers were visible on the walls. The hallway stretched silently into shadow. Daniel leaned forward slightly and looked down the corridor. Every door along the hall was closed. A faint draft moved the air like a quiet breath. For a moment, he considered pressing the door close button, but curiosity pulled him forward. He stepped out of the elevator onto the strange floor. Behind him, the elevator doors slid shut immediately. The sound echoed through the hallway. Daniel suddenly felt very far from home. He turned around and pressed the call button beside the elevator. Nothing happened. The panel remained dark. Daniel glanced down the corridor again. The hallway seemed longer now than it had looked from the elevator. The air smelled faintly like dust and old wood. One of the ceiling lights flickered above him. The light pulse traveled down the hall like a slow wave. Each bulb blinked one after another. Daniel felt a chill crawl along his arms. Something about the place felt unfinished, like a flaw that had been forgotten during construction. Yet the doors looked worn from years of use. He walked slowly toward the nearest door. The number plate had been scratched away, leaving only faint marks where digits once were. He knocked gently. No answer came from inside. The silence behind the door felt thick and unnatural. Daniel stepped back uneasily. Further down the hall, another door creaked open by itself. The sound echoed like a whisper across the corridor. Daniel froze where he stood. The door slowly stopped halfway open. Inside was complete darkness. No movement, no light, no sound. Daniel's instincts told him to leave immediately. But before he could move, he heard footsteps from somewhere deeper in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate. The footsteps stopped suddenly. A moment later, a voice spoke quietly from the darkness. It sounded almost identical to Daniel's own voice. The voice said his name once. Just one word, soft and calm. Daniel. His heartbeat began racing instantly. The hallway suddenly felt much narrower. Even the air seemed heavier. Daniel backed toward the elevator door. He pressed the call button repeatedly. The panel remained dark. From the open doorway down the hall, something shifted in the shadows. A faint silhouette appeared against the darkness. It was shaped like a person. The figure stepped forward slightly into the dim light. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The face was unmistakably his own. The duplicate stood silently for several seconds. Its expression was completely blank. Then it smiled slowly. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. The smile on the other face looked wrong, stretched too wide. The figure began walking toward him. Each step echoed louder than the last. Daniel slammed his fist against the elevator panel again. This time, the light suddenly turned on. The elevator doors slid open behind him. Daniel stumbled inside without looking back. He immediately pressed the button for the 7th floor again. The doors closed just as the duplicate reached the end of the hallway. For a brief moment, their eyes met through the narrowing gap. The other Daniel was still smiling. The elevator began moving upward rapidly. The lights inside flickered wildly. Daniel leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. After a few seconds, the elevator stopped again. The number display finally showed 7. The doors opened to the familiar hallway of his floor. Everything looked normal again. The carpet was clean and the lights were bright. Daniel rushed out of the elevator. He walked quickly to his apartment door and unlocked it. The moment he stepped inside, he locked it again behind him. His hands trembled slightly. The apartment looked exactly as he had left it that morning. The living room lamp still glowed beside the couch. The quiet normality felt almost surreal. Daniel walked to the window and looked down at the rainy street below. Cars finally began passing again. The city seemed alive once more. He told himself the strange floor must have been some maintenance level he didn't know about. Maybe stress and exhaustion had made everything feel stranger than it was. Still, the memory of that face wouldn't leave his mind. Daniel went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His reflection in the microwave door caught his attention. For a moment, he studied his own face carefully. He turned away and walked toward the bedroom. As he passed the hallway mirror, something made him stop. The reflection seemed a fraction of a second slower than his movement. Daniel stared at the mirror again. His reflection stood perfectly still now. Everything looked normal. He shook his head and continued walking. The apartment suddenly felt quieter than usual. Even the refrigerator's hum had stopped. Daniel reached the bedroom door and pushed it open. The room was dark except for faint streetlight through the blinds. He stepped inside slowly. Something moved near the far corner of the room, just a brief shadow shift. Daniel's heart skipped. He reached for the light switch beside the door. The light turned on instantly. The room was completely empty. Daniel let out a nervous breath and laughed softly at himself. He turned back toward the hallway. That was when he noticed something on the bedroom wall. Written across the paint in dark letters were 3 words. The handwriting looked exactly like his own. The message read, "You took my place." Daniel stared at the words in disbelief. His mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. The letters looked freshly written. Behind him, the bedroom door slowly creaked shut. The sound echoed softly in the quiet apartment. Daniel turned around quickly. The hallway outside was now completely dark. The living room lamp had turned off. Only the bedroom light remained. Then he heard footsteps again, slow and deliberate. They were coming from the other side of the door.